Welcome back. This morning, we want to discuss the reliability and validity of surveys. What do researchers need to consider when gathering information and data? How do they ensure that surveys on important national issues or social issues are accurate before they are presented to the public as fact? Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by Africa Check editor Julian Rademeyer. Julian, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Morning. Thank you.
As part of the Morning News Today team debriefing meeting that we have after every show, we were discussing recently. There's been so many surveys recently, and in one particular week there was a survey that's saying people in Johannesburg are unfriendly, and the very same week there was another survey that says we were very happy. Well, I know happiness and friendliness may not be the same thing, but you started wondering, surveys, I mean, what goes on into doing a survey? So we just wanted to talk about the reliability and validity of them overall. Just take us, I mean, to get a reliable and valid survey, what must happen?
Look, I think we're inundated with surveys and polls these days. You have online polls, news websites, various news websites. You have those daily polls that you can click on, what are your views on this particular subject. The bottom line is that you should never, ever take a survey or a poll for granted. And they're fairly basic questions one can ask. Many of them sort of follow the basic journalistic principle of, the 5 W's and the H: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I think it's important to look at those aspects. So you look at, who conducted the poll, who conducted the survey. Are they a credible organization? Have they been in the field? Have they done this sort of work before? Significantly, I think it's also important to look at how the questions are phrased, because phrasing can be very important. To use a famous example from the US, people were polled and asked, do you favor a crackdown on illegal weapons, illegal guns? Obviously, people said yes, we would favor such a crackdown. That was interpreted there by the pollsters as meaning we want more gun control. The National Rifle Association, which is a very pro-gun lobby group, subsequently did another poll and said, would you be happy if police had the discretion to decide who could or could not own a firearm? The response to that from many of the people polled was, no, actually we're not happy with that. And they interpret that as meaning people don't want gun control. So the questions are significant. The sequence in which questions are asked are significant. If you ask someone, are you happy with government's performance? And then ask them about the economy of the country, you could get a very different response if you ask them, economy affected you, the downturn in the economy, and are you happy with government's performance?
In South Africa, I would hope we do have a number of reputable survey research houses that we can trust that they do the right thing. But you bring up a very important point. The content is key here. I'm not talking about the normal poll, do you like red or blue or what? I'm talking about the real stuff here. Because sometimes we tend then to paint ourselves as South Africans as either sad or happy or friendly based on some of these polls, when it's actually not true.
No, context is vital, and in reporting on polls, news organizations should look and interrogate at those polls. Reporting on a poll as fact is the equivalent of running a single source news story. That poll should be interrogated. The context is vital. Other voices need to be there. The poll needs to be analyzed. All of these questions that I've mentioned need to be looked at.
We in the media need to therefore tread carefully around surveys and question them a little bit more. I think that's a valid point. But generally, sample size. We are a population of about 50-odd million people today in South Africa. I don't remember the exact number according to the last census results, but it's about 50-odd million. What kind of sample size should you be looking at to have a valid enough poll to say this sample is valid for me to then draw the inferences or the conclusions I'll be drawing about my survey outcomes?
I think in many researchers would probably be agreed that a minimum sample of around a randomly selected sample of about 1,000 people is a base that you could begin with. That can give you, but it varies depending on the type of survey you're doing, what exactly you're looking at. Are you looking at a national issue, a provincial issue? What methods are you using in conducting your survey? But a large sample size is often very useful. We've had quite a bit of controversy recently about the World Economic Forum's recent ranking of maths and science. In that instance, 58 business people, 58 business leaders, as they called in the document, were surveyed and expressed their opinions, giving a very negative response to maths and science in South Africa. Is that representative? No. Does it tell you anything more than it does about the opinions of those 58 business people? Not really. It's not a ranking system that can be relied on.
Yeah. So there's a lot more that needs to happen here. But from what you know in South Africa, from your perspective in Africa Check, our surveys that have been done at the national level about national issues, have they been pretty much accurate?
It's very hard to make a sweeping judgment call on that. I mean, I think there are some very, very good surveys that have been done scientifically, but we do have a rash of surveys, self-selecting surveys, online surveys that are being done, and are churned out as news stories. And I think the reporting is quite problematic in many instances. Reporters aren't asking the questions that should be asked, and reporting on those particular polls and interrogating them properly.
Yeah, before we state them as fact. Thank you very much, Julian. I think you've helped us to understand a little bit of that world of surveys there. That's Africa Check editor Julian Rademeyer.